I'm Harriet Frew, eating disorder therapist, teacher and podcaster, and you're about to start healing from your eating disorder and transforming your life and your relationship with food and body. I've worked in NHS and private practice supporting clients for 20 years, and I believe that recovery is possible for you. This podcast dives into expert interviews, evidence-based psychological approaches, and anecdotal tips from the therapy room from my years of experience. If you're wanting to heal your relationship with food, feel confident in your body, develop self-love and self-acceptance, and create a life of freedom and meaning, then this podcast is for you. Thank you for being here.
Now today I'm going to talk all about setting eating disorder recovery goals for 2025. Now of course, you can set goals at any point in time, but sometimes New Year can be as good a time as any. And I think especially when the world around you might be luring you down the diet culture goal wellness route. So this can be a good time of year to really step aside and get strongly rooted in your own lane and deciding the future that you want. Because I think we can all be tempted this time of year with all the marketing and promotions and you kind of messaging can be very seductive to just think, maybe if I just followed that plan, that would be the answer. That would get me to where I want to get to. But no, we want to stay in our recovery lane. And you don't want to be procrastinating recovery or putting it off until someday. I think we can all be guilty of this because I think when you're thinking about the next meal or how you're going to manage your emotions tomorrow in the short term, it can just feel overwhelming not to have food as a means of coping. But actually, when we start to think about the longer term and where we're going in life, actually you want to be implementing healthier strategies. You want to be starting to really take care of yourself so you can really live a life that is more aligned with your purpose, your values, your joy, and ultimately you're going to be a lot more content. Now, as we know, eating disorders can rob weeks, months, and ultimately years of your life. You can't get back your teenage finding your identity phase with that fun and experimentation, or your 20s where you're growing up and finding yourself and hopefully traveling or getting involved in further education or your first job, meeting people, growing as a person. Having an eating disorder can massively impact the quality of your relationships, your career path, and ultimately your potential and what you do with your life. Having an eating disorder is like having a millstone around your neck where you are dragging with you everything. It stunts your growth, it numbs your feelings, it sucks your identity away and makes a smaller life. So how do we even begin to embrace some recovery goals? Okay, so I'm just going to give you some ideas to help you with this. I'm not saying this is the way you have to do it, but it might be something to think about and see what works for you. So I think what's really helpful in beginning to embrace recovery goals is to think about having extraordinary focus and dedication to recovery. Now, how I wish that recovery was simply turning up for an hour a week to therapy, finding that perfect therapist or coach, someone in a way that could fix you and guide you all the way to the road to healing, and it could just be a nice, quick and easy solution. Sadly, it is not. Recovery from an eating disorder is often a life overhaul because the eating disorder is like a weed that has tangled roots running through every minute of your day. It's not just about the food or how you feel about your body. It impacts your relationships, your worth, the way you care for yourself, and how you show up in the world. And this can feel overwhelmingly scary to face up to. And it can feel like such a huge responsibility to change. And you might wonder, where would you even begin? Now, I'm saying it's a life overhaul and a lot down to you. But of course, therapy, support from loved ones, professionals can all be an often necessary and a vital part of the journey. You haven't got to do it alone, but ultimately it is your recovery and your journey. And although this can feel scary, it can also feel quite empowering because you might not realize it yet, but you have so much wisdom inside you. Part of the problem sometimes is that you've been spinning so fast and you've been so distracted that you haven't had a chance to even begin to tune in to all that wisdom within you. But by slowing down, by committing time and energy to recovery, by setting boundaries and saying no to other parts of your life, you can begin to carve out some healing time. And you'll be amazed what's possible when you give recovery the focus it really needs. Now, I know for me, when I went travelling to Australia at the age of 23, this offered me an unexpected chance to reflect and focus on recovery in a new way. Now, I didn't go to Australia thinking I was going to recover from my eating disorder when I was in Australia. It was almost like another thing that happened or was happening while I was over there. Because of when I was in Australia, it was the first time in such a long time where I actually slowed down. My lifestyle changed hugely. I wasn't on the academic treadmill of studying and achieving and worrying about whether I was going to university or not, or what I was going to do. All those different things that can feel quite overwhelming as you are an emerging adult. And I just had a lot of time where my days weren't filled completely. I was still working in a cafe, working, sometimes doing some fruit picking, different things like that. But I had a lot of unstructured time, which was really helpful. So I had time to slow down, to reflect, to journal, to read books. It was the days before internet and podcasts, of course, because I am very old. But that was definitely a time for me to focus so much in on my personal development. It was also a time to communicate with people in my life where relationships were difficult. I did quite a lot of healing around my family of origin and relationships when I was in Australia. I remember writing to both my dad and my mum, and this was a very sort of helpful part of my healing process. And I want to just be clear here, by contacting my mum and dad in this situation, it wasn't that then everything was resolved and everyone apologised and we all kind of skipped off into the sunset and it was all amazing. Far from it, really. It was much more of a coming to terms with and accepting people's limitations and recognising, perhaps that they were doing the best they could at the time. For me, getting more out of victim mode and starting to take more personal responsibility, and also me starting to really acknowledge more perhaps the way I had been affected by certain things that had happened, and to start to work on that so I could begin to heal. Okay, so these were all things that happened to me when I was in Australia. So when I came back to the UK, did I continue with the zeal I had embarked on recovery in Australia? Of course not. I moved to London. I was starting a demanding course. However, that time in Australia changed me forever and set me truly on a healing path and one of awareness. Now, of course, we can't all go off backpacking to Australia, but to this day, I take the lessons from my Australian trip, slowing down, taking time, going inwards, reflecting, reading, listening to my feelings, writing, journaling, all the things that really helped me to be able to touch base with myself, to get to know myself again, to listen to myself, to process my feelings, and valuable lessons. So have a think for you, what could be your first baby step to carving out more time for recovery? Because it is a reality, you need to carve out time. If you're going to get physically fit, you would need to be carving out time to, do that, and you probably would do that. If you were learning a new skill, like learning a language, you'll be taking time every week to kind of practice your verbs, learn vocabulary, etc. So with recovery as well, you need to make time every day to focus on this so you can start to begin this almost life overhaul that is needed. And I don't want to overwhelm anyone here because you can just do this in such baby incremental steps, but they will add up to such a lot of change. So number 2, get clear on your life goals and values. Now, I don't think anyone wants to be remembered at their funeral for losing weight and doing it well, but often we are leading our lives with the dedication, time and focus on this goal, although it was our highest value. Now, as human beings, it can be extremely challenging to live a values-aligned life because we're so pulled in different directions. We have expectations thrust on us by society, well-meaning family, friends and ourselves, and often we might be climbing a ladder which is leant against the wrong wall. So to get clarity on your values, you can think about what would really matter to you now if you just had a year left to live. What would you be doing with your time? Who would you be spending time with? What hobbies or activities would you do? Where would you travel, or where might you want to go and see? What would you be doing with your work time or study? And when we narrow our focus down in this way, all the unimportant parts of life just disappear, and we suddenly understand what personally brings to us meaning and what doesn't. And we are likely to care much less about what others think, but get really aligned with what matters most. Now, of course, you don't want to wait until you have just a year left to live before you start thinking about life in this way. You want to refocus now and tune in to what is really important to you. And even if you have absolutely no idea or how you might achieve it, or even take the first step, just being honest with yourself and saying things out loud or writing them down can be empowering. Now, I think sometimes as well here, we've become so disillusioned with life sometimes that we feel like, well, there's no point writing down my hopes and dreams because there's no way I'm ever going to achieve them. But I think it's a really powerful process to get in touch with what does light you up, what excites you, what brings you joy, because it doesn't matter at this stage if you don't know how you're going to achieve these things, but just by writing down your hopes and dreams and what's important to you, it can help you start to realize maybe why you're not feeling so good at this moment in time, and maybe why you are using the ED to cope. So I think we often look around us and see what other people are doing. We follow values that we feel we should pursue. I think in society we're very conditioned, aren't we, to value perhaps like fame or kind of what other people think, being up there on a pedestal, having loads and loads of money, having like flashy material goods. Now, I know myself personally, two of my highest values outside, I'd say, of kind of connection and just connection with others. That's a massively high value for me, but I really value my creativity and my freedom so highly. So for me, I don't want to be a slave to the 9 to 5. I want to be in charge of my schedule. I want to work at times that suit me so I can work in a complementary place with my energy. And if I looked at everyone else, perhaps at some of my closest friends or my siblings, most people in my life are not self-employed, are not probably working in a non-conventional way as I am. But there's no right or wrong here. For some people, actually, it's massively aligned with their values to be working a 9 to 5 because they really value that kind of safety and that structure and maybe having a team around them, all those things. Not that you can't have a team around you when you're self-employed, but you know what I'm saying. So think about what really works for you. So get a journal, write down what you want for your life. Think about all the different sectors. Think about health, relationships, work and study, hobbies, fun and adventure, finances, spirituality, whatever else is important for you to include. Banish all the shoulds, but focus in on your wants and desires and give yourself permission to step fully into your own power. Okay, number 3, surround yourself with encouragers and uplifters. Now, we cannot do recovery on our own. Recovery is not easy. You need people around you who make you feel good. So it might be your family, it may not be. I think it's important to acknowledge that sometimes the people that we would like to be our supporters just can't be this. And this can be really disappointing and frustrating. And it was massively disappointing and frustrating for me. However, by acknowledging the truth here, by accepting this, it frees you up to really tap into the support that is going to be helpful. And the key here is noticing how you feel when you're around particular people. So I think often we think that we should be feeling uplifted by being around certain people. But it's important to go into your body and notice, when you think of certain people, who makes you feel good when you think about spending time with them? Who makes you feel uplifted, accepted, loved, believed in? Because even having 1 or 2 people in your life who can do this for you can massively help your self-belief and ability to make changes. I know for me, people that have believed in me have had such a huge impact on my life, my healing and my personal development. And this has mainly been actually people outside of my family, okay? It's been like friends, mentors, work colleagues. And these people have had such an influential impact on my life. And I would not be doing the job I am today without having those relationships. So if you're predominantly around people who sap your energy or criticize or berate you or put you down or offload all their problems all of the time without there being balance and mutual sharing, then no wonder you're finding the prospect of change difficult. So you need to distance yourself from the drainers and spend more time with the uplifters and encouragers. And this translates to social media too. If you're focusing on material that is impacting your thoughts in a negative way and causing you to obsess more with the eating disorder behaviours, then you need to be ruthless and block, mute or unfollow, and replace your feed with uplifting and supportive accounts that are going to fuel your journey with positive energy and healing. And if you find that you just have an overload of food and body image accounts, and some of these can be really, really helpful, particularly around body neutrality, intuitive eating, etc. But you may want to just fill your feed with cats or travel or art or something completely different. So you're just kind of expanding your consciousness and you're getting your kind of head above water and realizing all the different things that the world has to offer you. So these days, I am ruthless with who is in my inner circle. With the people I love and trust, I can be authentically very open and honest, and this is reciprocated. Now, this is not something that we can do with volumes of people. My closest people include my sisters, my closest friend from university who has also recovered from bulimia many years ago, and a couple of my close therapist friends. And I've distanced myself from some of my old friends where we just had different values, and that's okay. And I might still see those friends occasionally, in more kind of light-hearted social settings, and that is fine. I still kind of value those people, but actually in terms of who I really let into my inner circle, I am really, really ruthless because actually I understand so much from my earlier life, just the impact of the people closest to you in impacting your well-being and self-esteem. And if you surround yourself with people who genuinely support and uplift you and encourage you, and of course call you out when you need kind of some advice or wisdom, and maybe you're making crazy decisions, but actually they're doing it from a place of love and acceptance and wanting the best for you. So make a list of the 5 people you consider to be your closest people in your life and do an honest audit of these relationships. Are these people supporting you or not? What might you need to change? So you don't necessarily need to banish people from your life, but boundaries are your friend here. Now, I know, and I've probably said this before on the podcast, with certain members of my family, I still have them in my life. I still maintain relationships with them, but with very firm boundaries, okay? And I think you don't have to be always like completely cut people out and never see them again. Maybe for some people in your life, that might be necessary. I think it's a very personal thing, and I'm not going to tell you where your boundaries should be, but I think it's really important for you to reflect personally on this, but make sure the people you're spending most time with are your uplifters, your encouragers, the people that value you and accept you for who you are. Okay, so number 4 in setting recovery goals. It's a grieving process, and that's okay. Saying goodbye to your eating disorder can feel like letting go of an old friend, maybe a toxic friend who sometimes would be there and supporting you through, but ultimately a friend that is not going to enhance your life for the long term. For everything it gives, it also takes away. Now, having said this, taking the different fork in the road can bring grief. Grief for the identity that your eating disorder gave you. Grief for the focus and distraction it offered you. Grief for what is safe and known and truly yours. Often people will say the eating disorder is the one thing that is truly mine. Grief for the praise you receive from the outside world when engaging in AD behaviours, although inwardly you are probably in a battle with yourself. For example, you may be listening and be an influencer and highly validated for your physique, even though there are many personal costs for you in maintaining this. It's okay to grieve though. It's part of the healing journey. It's part of the process to go through, and your brain will often be nostalgic or idealise the past. You'll remember the good bits with longing whilst brushing over all the ways the ED has held you back. The important thing here is to recognise this though for what it is. Rose-tinted nostalgia is not the whole truth. And I've been realising this more and more in my own life in terms of how I kind of romanticize and look back on things with nostalgia. and how I really kind of blot out sometimes the things that weren't so good about something and zoom in on all the things that bring back those kind of warm oxytocin or dopamine kind of inducing feelings. So it's okay to grieve. It's part of the healing journey. And I remember myself without my eating disorder, I remember feeling vulnerable. I couldn't escape and protect myself from the old in the way that I had before. I was feeling my feelings much more. It felt intense, it felt overwhelming, it felt scary. And also I started to care more about others again because of I had sort of been in this numb bubble, and actually once I started to get more back in touch with myself, it was a bit scary sometimes having to kind of deal with all the emotional stuff that life throws at you. But ultimately, we don't want to use an eating disorder for coping. It's maladaptive, it's unhelpful, it's not going to lead you down the path that you want to go to. And by letting go of something that's ultimately toxic and holding you back, you are making space for newness and freedom and much better self-worth. So, reflect on your common thought patterns that fuel unhelpful nostalgia. Are there old photos you're holding on to? Are there memories that you're getting stuck in which don't truly reflect the whole picture? Be frank and honest with yourself so you can create some emotional distance from the old ways of thinking. Number 5, believe and have certainty. So when stuck in the depths of an eating disorder, you can feel hopeless and overwhelmed. Change can feel impossible and out of reach. You may have become resigned to the thought of living with the eating disorder forever. You get stuck in this place, and it is the immensely challenging thing then to pursue the exits towards recovery. But believe and work on developing an inner certainty that change is possible, and it is possible. Start to shift your identity towards that of someone who is recovering and healing and who will ultimately be ED free. You are not beyond help. Many people have recovered who have experienced hugely challenging life situations, and many people before you have walked this tumultuous path. You are no different. With the right support, help and encouragement, you can change. So I found this quote yesterday, which I wrote in my journal, which says, "Hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny." And apparently it's from the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. So hardships often prepare ordinary people for extraordinary destiny. And I think this is so true. And I think of so many people that I kind of look up to, particularly in like the personal development space. People have really been through stuff, okay? It's by going through the pain that has led them to the place they're in today. And extraordinary doesn't have to mean conventionally successful in society's terms, money, fame, etc. I think about the numerous people who have guested on my podcast who waded from the deep trenches of an eating disorder into a space where they are healing and supporting others in the most profound, caring and wonderful ways every single day. It's very, very inspiring. So I know myself, I love personal development books and working on changing my mindset and beliefs. I truly believe that I'm a different person from the person in my 20s who felt so worthless, not good enough, and an emotional mess. And this is not about toxic positivity, but it's about really challenging those limited beliefs which shape our identity and forming new and inspiring, helpful ones based on the truth of who we are, as authentic beings, okay? So back in the day, I would so much think about all the things that I wasn't good at, compare myself to others, end up feeling that I was, completely inadequate, not good enough. And, I would very much believe the messages I was told growing up. Now I can have an honest appraisal of my strengths and weaknesses. There's still some areas of my life that I am not so good at, but I can step into my strengths and value those and also kind of, feel good about myself that I am expressing my kind of creative talents and strengths and doing that in a very aligned way, which brings me a lot of meaning and joy. And I'm absolutely imperfect and get things wrong, but I feel I'm absolutely living my purpose now, and I have self-worth and faith in myself, which I did not have in the past. So think about you in eating disorder recovery and how you would be spending your days. How would you be living your life? What would you be doing? Who would you be talking to? What would you be reading or watching? How would you prioritize your time? Number 6, be vulnerable with your inner circle. So in my own recovery journey, opening up to one or two of my closest friends was invaluable. Now, it wasn't always talking about specific eating disorder behaviors, because sometimes that's really hard. Unless someone has actually been through it themselves, they might find it really hard to understand. But I was talking about all the feelings, about life, about messy relationships, about feeling left out, trying to find out who I was or I wasn't, exploring childhood experiences, reflecting on why I struggled with certain things. And this was a reciprocal sharing experience, not one-sided. So it wouldn't feel like we were kind of burdening each other, because we were both on this self-development journey. We're kind of sharing and reflecting and inspiring and uplifting. And, we're both kind of in the trenches or coming out of the trenches. So we were kind of really aligned with each other, making sense of where each other was. It was incredibly helpful. Now, I appreciate that not everyone listening to this is naturally drawn to psychological understanding or reflection. I know for me, it's very much the way I work, my sort of personality. So generalizing, I think that many people with eating disorders are hugely empathetic, sensitive souls with a deep sense of caring and compassion. And underneath the layers that you protect yourself with, there is likely a significant part of you that longs to be understood, accepted, heard, and truly validated for who you are. Now, you might not be able to get this from your family, as I've said, but you can choose your friends. And there are many people out there in the world who are also craving this close connection and to be fully seen for who they are. So being open and vulnerable may not always feel safe or comfortable or familiar, perhaps due to your early environment and how conducive this was to enable vulnerability. So that's okay. But I promise you that with trusted and supportive people, vulnerability is a life changer. And once you start to open up in small baby steps, you will realize that you're not truly alone. Okay, the trouble is when we are just keeping everything inside, we look outside, we think that everyone else is coping, we think that we are this messy, imperfect person and that everyone else is coping and that we are deeply flawed. As soon as you start to be a bit more vulnerable and start to share things, you will realize actually every single person is going through stuff. It may not be the same as you, but they are all going through stuff. We are all walking life's messy path of imperfection. And your confidants may not struggle with eating issues, but they will have other struggles. And the deeper pain is often very, very similar. So reflect on your inner circle now. Do you have someone with whom you can be very open with and who can be open with you? If yes, prioritize this relationship. Spend more time together. If you don't, this is the time to seek out others. Take a baby step. Test the water with an initial friendly contact or message. And try not to put too much expectation on any one relationship. If someone doesn't respond, it's probably not about you. People have busy lives, lots of conflicting commitments. However, there are many people out there who are longing for friendship and openness and are waiting to meet someone just like you. Okay, and number 7. The baby steps add up to a big deal. So I remember in my own recovery, feeling overwhelmed. Where did I start? I had bulimia for my late teens into my 20s. And I certainly couldn't tackle everything in one go. So sometimes you need to break it down and focus on the one thing that is going to help give you a leap forward with your progress. Now, once you focus on one thing, you get a sense of accomplishment, you build a bit of momentum, and then you feel that you can work on the next thing, okay? So for me, a major turning point was working on stopping purging. So of course, getting well from an eating disorder is much more than eliminating one ED behaviour. However, this behaviour for me was extremely detrimental and fueled ginormous binges and restrictive eating. So addressing the purging had powerful ripple effects then on many other aspects of recovery and then my life in general. So it wasn't a perfect process. Didn't just decide one day to stop purging and it happened. It was messy and imperfect. But every day that I didn't purge, I gained momentum and confidence in what was possible. And every day that I didn't purge, I had even more to lose from going back. And I knew, sometimes my brain would think, just do it once, it won't matter. But I knew that if I just did it once, I would open the floodgates and it would unlikely to be just once. I would probably very quickly spiral down a very dodgy road all over again. So it was hard because it was a habit. It brought me relief and dopamine and a way of temporarily cleansing out my negative emotions. I would feel if I purged, I was kind of wiping the slate clean. Now, of course, that doesn't work as a healthy coping strategy. And it was also damaging my teeth. It fueled these huge binges, everything. But once I stopped, my teeth became better, or at least no worse. My health began to improve. I didn't feel kind of tired and weary and irritable as much. I was more in touch with my body and my hunger. And I started to deal with my feelings in a more constructive way rather than just trying to kind of banish them down the toilet. Yes, it was messy. Yes, it was hard. Absolutely, though, it was worth it. So this is just my story, okay? You need to decide on your own goal. What do you need to focus on? Is it about more regular eating and dedicating time and effort to some meal planning and self-care? Is it throwing out the weighing scales or beginning to reduce your frequency of weighing? Is it eating all your meals at a table and breaking free from mindless eating at the cupboard door? Is it planning in some self-care and journal time daily so you can reflect on your goals and values? What is it for you? Think about what is going to be the most helpful step. So in recap, 7 ways to approach your recovery goals. Number 1, have extraordinary focus and dedication. Okay, it's more than just 1 hour a week. Number 2, get clear on your life goals and values. Number 3, surround yourself with encouragers and uplifters. Number 4 is a grieving process, and that's okay. Number 5, believe and have certainty. Number 6, be vulnerable with your inner circle. And number 7, the baby steps add up to a very big deal. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you're not following me already on Instagram, do seek me out, the Eating Disorder Therapist _ And for further support with your relationship with food, do go to the eatingdisordertherapist.co.uk. If you enjoy this podcast, I'll be so grateful if you'd follow, rate and review, as it helps it reach so many more listeners. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to sharing another podcast episode with you very soon.